Now those of you out there considering the Blon BL03s may be wanting something more relaxed and more bassy. Well, here is the Blon BL07s. Let's talk about it. Behold the Blon BL07. Now before we get started, I should note that these were sent out to me for review, but this won't affect my review in any way, shape, or form. Anything you're going to hear here will be my own personal opinion. Also, this is going to be more of a gaming-centric review versus an audiophile review. I'll be touching on gaming-centric things, but it's to explain how well these will do in terms of how they sound in games. So with that being said, let's get started. Cracking open the packaging, we get some pretty decent packaging, and in that packaging we get the IEMs, a cable, some ear tips, more ear tips, a bag for it all, and some paper. Starting with the cable, this is the exact same cable that first came out with the Blon Mini, which I really like, because while it's not braided, it is decently thick and durable, which prevents tangles and tears. The straight 3.5mm jack is metal and nicely built, as is the splitter, which has a very similar design, which I also believe is nice and durable as well. Moving along the split, we do get an inline microphone with a single button for control. Alright, now for those of you who are curious as how the little inline mic sounds, it sounds, pretty okay, honestly. It is the same mic cable as the one you'll find on the Blon Minis. And honestly, it does a pretty decent job. I'm going to type next to my little keyboard here so you have a general idea of how much sound you'll pick up in terms of the keyboard versus my actual voice. So take it as you will. Honestly, not bad. Anyway, at the IEM end, we of course get ear hooks, which is pretty standard these days. Moving on to the IEMs themselves, they have a very interesting angular crystallic-like shape formation, which I very much like. The reflective polish, while nice, are prone to fingerprints, but honestly, you're not really going to see them because they'll be on your head anyway. With that being said, the entire build of the IEM is metal. And I don't mean just the angular part of the shell, but also the sides and the back. Those are all made of metal, including the stem as well as of course, the grill that keeps your earwax out. The only things not made of metal are, of course, the silicone tips, as well as the 2-pin connectors for your cable. Anyway, with everything set up, here's how they look like on my head. They're medium-sized IEM, so they fit in my ears quite nicely, and I think they would fit in most people's ears as well, unless your ears are really, really tiny. Aesthetically speaking, I think they're pretty okay looking because by design, they look pretty nice, and they don't protrude out the sides of my head too much, which is also nice. Comfort-wise, I found them to be just okay. I was able to comfortably wear them for a bit more than 2 hours, but beyond that, they started to get a little bit uncomfortable. Granted, 2 hours is a very long time to be wearing earbuds, and your mileage will vary in terms of comfort depending on the size and shape of your ear and ear canals. Alright, now when it comes to the sound of the Blon BL07s, I know a lot of people would want me to compare them to the Blon BL03s, which I currently don't have on me, as one of my friends wanted to try out IEM Life, and, I let them try out the Blon BL03s because they're a really good choice. But I do remember what they sound like very clearly, as they have a very distinct sound, and what I can say is it's definitely a bit different from the Blon BL07s. The Blon BL03s had a funky W-shape sound signature, which made them very good for competitive games. These Blon BL07s are much more relaxed, with a much more traditional V-shaped sound signature, which is a nice warm bassy sound, which I think is good for relaxed listening, but also for more relaxed gaming compared to competitive gaming. So let's get into the sound range a little bit. At the low end, we get a very nice deep boomy bass versus a punchy bass, meaning we're gonna get a very nice reach into the sub bass, those lower bass regions. It hits pretty good and hard at those low end sectors, giving them very good thump, versus at the higher ranges of bass, so it's less punchy and more boomy in terms of its bass sound, which some people may or may not like. Some people like those bass notes to hit really hard and slam at you, but these will more likely, they're essentially gonna thump at you, if that makes sense. Anyway, moving on to the mids. The mid-range is definitely scooped out. It is recessed. That is obvious. This is normal of a V-shaped sound signature. And that's not necessarily bad, but we do experience a loss of detail and clarity in the mid-range sector, so that's kind of unfortunate. And we also are able to then introduce bass bleed, but that's also kind of normal when it comes to V-shaped sound signatures. It is definitely a more relaxed sound, and I expect this. This isn't a bad thing. This is very normal, and it's good for easy listening, honestly. Though in terms of competitive gaming, you would want more clarity in those mid ranges. Now when it comes to the highs themselves, they're pretty okay. You got a pretty good amount of detail and clarity. I do think I would have preferred a little bit more clarity and detail, but that's because I've listened to more expensive earbuds. At this price range, I think it's actually pretty okay. It's not bad at all. So considering the price, it's got pretty good highs. They have a pretty good reach up into the higher ranges without getting harsh and sibilant. That's sibilant is that piercing your ear kind of sound when things get too sharp. And so since it doesn't have that, at least for me, that's you know, that's always a good thing in my book. Alright, now if we move into the soundstage and imaging of these guys, let's also talk about like how well the sound does in gaming. So, starting with the soundstage, it is small. That's to be expected. It's a set of IEMs. I'm not expecting a lot of soundstage. And for the size of the soundstage, it's just okay. It's not very big, it's not very small. It's just kind of average size in terms of like the IEM world. It's not very big at all. And the shape of the soundstage is your standard like oval shape, where you'll have more like a larger sense of space from your sides versus your front and your back, and that's pretty standard. Now, when it comes to the imaging, in terms of like the accuracy of where things are, it's actually pretty okay. Anything I needed to hear was exactly where it would be. I wouldn't say that it's got like pinpoint accuracy, but it's got like pretty good general accuracy. So if someone's to my left, they're to my left. If they're to my corner, they're to my corner. So that's good. And the sound separation itself, that's like, you know, it's exactly what it sounds like. The separation of sounds between each other to differentiate where things are. Like, say you're listening to multiple footsteps, or footsteps in one area and gunshots in the other area. It's just okay. So I don't really get them mixed up too often. So overall soundstage imaging and sound separation, it's not bad. It's not amazing. It's okay. It's accurate enough. It's not too small. It's not too big. But it's definitely nothing to write home about. Now, if we put the sound signature into play with like the soundstage and imaging, I would say that the Blon BL07 would do a lot better in less competitive gaming settings. This has a lot to do with like the mids being more recessed and less detailed compared to say something like the Blon BL03s. With the mids being less forward, the mid-range sound in general isn't brought to your attention, and there's a lot of sounds that happen in that range, especially in competitive games. Like when it comes to like the sound of footsteps and whatnot, especially, those are usually mid-range sounds with a little bit of like treble and some bass depending on like the footsteps of the character, like how big they are and stuff like that. And with a more recessed sound, you still are going to hear them, but they won't be brought to your attention nearly as quickly or as presently as something that has a more forward mid-range presence, such as the Blon BL03s. So for tracking, yes, you still can track and play competitive games with them, but those sounds won't be like catching your attention nearly as quickly because they're not as forward as, once again, compared to say something like the Blon BL03s. With all that being said, I do find them a lot more enjoyable if I'm playing less competitively, and this also includes if I'm playing like competitive games less competitively, because the sound range sounds just really nice and relaxed. It's not harsh. The low end is just a nice thing to have, because sounds like explosions have a nice, good, deep rumble, which, while can be like very strong, it just kind of helps you with that immersion. So if you're playing also more like those immersive like open world kind of games, I do think the sound is just more enjoyable for those games compared to like if I use the Blon BL03s for those games. I think a relaxed sound is just a lot more enjoyable for like those worldly kind of less competitive like situation type of games. Long story short, these are good for games. Just they're not as good as other IEMs within this price range for more competitive games. You typically in a competitive setting want something that'll give you a competitive edge, and that's why you want like that forward mid-range and like the detail and whatnot, and like the mids and the highs. But if you're gonna play these competitive games not that competitively compared to like someone who's like competitive, then yeah, sure, go ahead. It's an enjoyable kind of sound. It's relaxed. It's chill. And you'd enjoy them also for music very much, I'd say. I'd say. Well, with that being said, that's all I got for today. So, if you did like this video, or, you know, this video did help you out with your whole decision-making process, do leave me a like, subscribe for more content, hit the notification bell if you want to, like, know when I'm posting next. Sometimes I stream, sometimes I don't. But either way, I'm going to have, like, a little link in description about that kind of stuff. So, is down there. Also, I should note that if you do want to buy them, I'll have a little link in the description in case you do want to like purchase your own set of Blon BL07s. So yeah, I think that's all the things I have in my script. Fun fact, I don't have a script. I just kind of like have bullet points, and even then, I just mostly go off on my own head and bullet points I've made in my head. So yeah, that's it. I'll see you guys later.